Phoenix is the capital and largest city of the U.S. state of Arizona, with 1,563,025 people. Phoenix is the sixth most populous city nationwide, the most populous state capital in the United States, and the only state capital with a population of more than 1 million residents. Phoenix is the anchor of the Phoenix metropolitan area, also known as the Valley of the Sun, which in turn is a part of the Salt River Valley. The metropolitan area is the 12th largest by population in the United States, with approximately 4.3 million people as of 2010. In addition, Phoenix is the county seat of Maricopa County and is one of the largest cities in the United States by land area. Settled in 1867 as an agricultural community near the confluence of the Salt and Gila rivers, Phoenix incorporated as a city in 1881. Located in the northeastern reaches of the Sonoran Desert, Phoenix has a subtropical desert climate. Despite this, its canal system led to a thriving farming community. Many of the original crops remaining important parts of the Phoenix economy for decades, such as alfalfa, cotton, citrus, and hay. In fact, the 5 C's remained the driving forces of Phoenix's economy until after World War II, when high-tech industries began to move into the valley and air conditioning made residences much more comfortable in the very hot summers. The city averaged a 4% annual population growth rate over a 40-year period from the mid-1960s to the mid-2000s. This growth rate slowed during the Great Recession of 2007-09 and has rebounded slowly. Phoenix is the cultural center of the Valley of the Sun, as well as the entire state. History. Early history. For more than 2,000 years, the Hohokam peoples occupied the land that would become Phoenix. The Hohokam created roughly 135 miles of irrigation canals, making the desert land arable. Paths of these canals would later become used for the modern Arizona Canal, Central Arizona Project Canal, and the Hayden Roads Aqueduct. The Hohokam also carried out extensive trade with the nearby Anasazi, Mogollon and Sinagua, as well as with the more distant Mesoamerican civilizations. It is believed that between 1300 and 1450, periods of drought and severe floods led to the Hohokam civilization's abandonment of the area. After the departure of the Hohokam, groups of Acamelo-O'odham, Tohono-O'odham and Maricopa tribes began to use the area, as well as segments of the Yavapai and Apache. The O'odham were offshoots of the Sobaipuri tribe, who in turn were thought to be the descendants of the formerly urbanized Hohokam. The Acamelo-O'odham were the major Indian group in the area and lived in small villages, with well-defined irrigation systems, which spread over the entire Gila River Valley, from Florence in the east to the Estrellas in the west. Their crops included corn, beans and squash for food, while cotton and tobacco were also cultivated. Mostly a peaceful group, they did band together with the Maricopa for the mutual protection against incursions by both the Yuma and Apache tribes. The Maricopa are part of the larger Yuma people, however they migrated east from the lower Colorado and Gila rivers in the early 1800s, when they began to be enemies with the Yuma brethren, settling amongst the existing communities of the Acamelo-O'odham. The Tohono-O'odham lived in the region as well, but the main concentration was to the south and stretched all the way to the Mexican border. Living in small settlements, the O'odham were seasonal farmers who took advantage of the rains, rather than the large-scale irrigation of the Acamel. They grew crops such as sweet Indian corn, tapiri beans, squash, lentils, sugarcane and melons, as well as taking advantage of native native plants, such as saguaro fruits, cholla buds, mesquite tree beans, and mesquite candy. They also hunted local game such as deer, rabbit, and javelina for meat. When the Mexican-American War ended in 1848, Mexico sold its northern zone to the United States and residents became U.S. citizens. The Phoenix area became part of the New Mexico Territory. In 1863, the mining town of Wickenburg was the first to be established in what is now Maricopa County, to the northwest of modern Phoenix. At the time, Maricopa County had not yet been incorporated. The land was within Yavapai County, which included the major town of Prescott to the north of Wickenburg. The U.S. Army created Fort McDowell on the Verde River in 1865 to forestall Native American uprisings. The fort established a camp on the south side of the Salt River by 1866, which was the first non-native settlement in the valley after the decline of the Hohokam. In later years, other nearby settlements would form and merge to become the city of Tempe, but this community was incorporated after Phoenix. Founding and incorporation. The history of the city of Phoenix begins with Jack Swilling, a Confederate veteran of the Civil War. In 1867, while traveling through the Salt River Valley, he saw a potential for farming, much like the military had already cultivated further east, near Fort McDowell. He formed a small community that same year about 4 miles east of the present city. Lord Darrell Dupper, one of the original settlers in Swilling's party, suggested the name Phoenix, as it described a city born from the ruins of a former civilization. The Board of Supervisors in Yavapai County, which at the time encompassed Phoenix, officially recognized the new town on May 4, 1868, and the first post office was established the following month with Swilling as the postmaster. On February 12, 1871, the territorial legislature created Maricopa County, the sixth one formed in the Arizona Territory, by dividing Yavapai County. The first election for county office was held in 1871, when Tom Barnum was elected the first sheriff, running unopposed when the other two candidates, John A. Chenoweth and Jim Favorite, fought a duel wherein Chenoweth killed Favorite, and then was forced to withdraw from the race. The town grew during the 1870s, and President Ulysses S. Grant issued a land patent for the present site of Phoenix on April 10, 1874. By 1875, the town had a telegraph office, 16 saloons, and 4 dance halls, but the townside commissioner form of government needed an overhaul. So that year an election was held in which 3 village trustees, as well as several other officials, were elected. By 1880, the town's population stood at 2,453. By 1881, Phoenix's continued growth made the existing village structure with a board of trustees obsolete. The territorial legislature passed the Phoenix Charter Bill, incorporating Phoenix and providing for a mayor-council government, and became official on February 25, 1881, when it was signed by Governor John C. Fremont, officially incorporating Phoenix as a city with an approximate population of 2,500. In the 1880s, the arrival of the railroad in the valley was the first of several key events that altered the economy of Phoenix. Phoenix became a trade center, with its products reaching eastern and western markets. In response, the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce was organized on November 4, 1888. Earlier in 1888, the city offices were moved into the new City Hall at Washington and Central. When the territorial capital was moved from Prescott to Phoenix in 1889, the temporary territorial offices were also located in City Hall. With the arrival of the Santa Fe, Prescott and Phoenix Railroad in 1895, Phoenix was connected to Prescott, Flagstaff and other northern southern state communities. The increased access to commerce expedited the city's economic rise. The year 1895 also saw the establishment of Phoenix Union High School, with an enrollment of 90. 1900 to World War II. On February 25, 1901, Governor Murphy dedicated the permanent Capitol building, and the Carnegie Free Library opened 7 years later, on February 18, 1908, dedicated by Benjamin Fowler. The National Reclamation Act was signed by President Theodore Roosevelt in 1902, which allowed for dams to be built on waterways in the West for reclamation purposes. The first dam constructed under the Act, the Theodore Roosevelt Dam, began in 1903. It supplied both water and electricity, becoming the first multi-purpose dam, and Roosevelt himself attended the official dedication on May 18, 1911. At the time, it was the largest masonry dam in the world, forming Theodore Roosevelt Lake in the mountain east of Phoenix. On February 14, 1912, under President William Howard Taft, Phoenix became the capital of the newly formed state of Arizona. This occurred just 6 months after Taft had vetoed a joint congressional resolution granting statehood to Arizona, due to his disapproval of the state constitution's position regarding the recall of judges. In 1913, Phoenix adopted a new form of government, changing from a mayor-council system to council-manager, making it one of the first cities in the United States with this form of city government. After statehood, Phoenix's growth started to accelerate, and 8 years later, its population had reached 29,053. In 1920, Phoenix would see its first skyscraper, the Hurd Building. In 1929, Sky Harbor was officially opened, at the time owned by Scenic Airways. It would later be purchased by the city in 1935, who operates it to this day. On March 4, 1930, a former U.S. President Calvin Coolidge dedicated a dam on the Gila River named in his honor. However, the state had just been through a long drought, and the reservoir which was supposed to be behind the dam was virtually dry. The humorist Will Rogers, who was also on hand as a guest speaker, joked, "If that was my leg, I'd mow it." Phoenix's population had more than doubled during the 1920s, and now stood at 48,118. It was also during the 1930s that Phoenix and its surrounding area began to be called the Valley of the Sun, which was an advertising slogan invented to boost tourism. During World War II, Phoenix's economy shifted to that of a distribution center, transforming into an embryonic industrial city with the mass production of military supplies. There were 3 Air Force fields in the area: Luke Field, Williams Field, and Falcon Field, as well as 2 large pilot training camps, Thunderbird Field No. 1 in Glendale and Thunderbird Field No. 2 in Scottsdale. Post-World War II explosive growth. A town that had just over 65,000 residents in 1940 became America's 6th largest city by 2010, with a population of nearly 1.5 million, and millions more in nearby suburbs. When the war ended, many of the men who had undergone the training in Arizona returned, bringing the new families. Learning of this large untapped labor pool enticed many large industries to move their operations to the area. In 1948, high-tech industry, which would become a staple of the state's economy, arrived in Phoenix when Motorola chose Phoenix for the site of its new Research and Development Center for Military Electronics, seeing the same advantages as Motorola. Other high-tech companies such as Intel and McDonnell Douglas would also move into the valley and open manufacturing operations. By 1950, over 150 5,000 people resided in the city and thousands more in surrounding communities. The 1950s growth was spurred on by advances in air conditioning, which allowed both homes and businesses to offset the extreme heat experienced in Phoenix and the surrounding areas during its long summers. There was more new construction in Phoenix in 1959 alone than during the period of more than 30 years from 1914 to 1946. Like many emerging American cities at the time, Phoenix's spectacular growth did not occur evenly. It largely took place on the city's north side, a region that was nearly all Caucasian. In 1962, one local activist testified at a U.S. Commission on Civil Rights hearing that of 31,000 homes that had recently sprung up in this neighborhood, not a single one had been sold to an African American. Phoenix's African American and Mexican American communities remained largely sequestered on the town's south side. The color lines were so rigid that no one north of Van Buren Street would rent to the African American baseball star Willie Mays, in town for spring training in the 1960s. In 1964, a reporter from the New Republic wrote of segregation in these terms: "Apartheid is complete. The two cities looked each other across a golf course." 1960s to present, the continued rapid population growth led more businesses to the valley to take advantage of the labor pool, and manufacturing, particularly in the electronics sector, continued to grow. The convention and tourism industries saw rapid expansion during the 1960s, with tourism becoming the third largest industry by the end of the decade. In 1960, the Phoenix Corporate Center opened. At the time, it was the tallest building in Arizona, topping off at 341 feet. The 1960s saw many other buildings constructed as the city expanded rapidly, including the Rosenzweig Center, today called Phoenix City Square, the landmark Phoenix Financial Center, as well as many of Phoenix's residential high-rises. In 1965, the Arizona Veterans Memorial Coliseum was opened at the Arizona State Fairgrounds, west of downtown. When Phoenix was awarded a NBA franchise in 1968, which would be called the Phoenix Suns, they played the home games at the Coliseum until 1992, after which they moved to Talking Stick Resort Arena. In 1968, the Central Arizona Project was approved by President Lyndon B. Johnson, assuring future water supplies for Phoenix, Tucson, and the agricultural corridor in between. The following year, Pope Paul VI created the Diocese of Phoenix on December 2 by splitting the Archdiocese of Tucson, with Edward A. McCarthy as the first bishop. In the 1970s, the downtown area experienced a resurgence, with a level of construction activity not seen again until the urban real estate boom of the 2000s. By the end of the decade, Phoenix adopted the Phoenix Concept 2000 plan, which split the city into urban villages, each with its own village core where greater height and density was permitted, further shaping the free market development culture. Originally, there were 9 villages, but this has been expanded to 15 over the years. This officially turned Phoenix into a city of many nodes, which would later be connected by freeways. 1972 would see the opening of the Phoenix Symphony Hall. Other major structures which saw construction downtown during this decade were the Wells Fargo Plaza, the Chase Tower and the U.S. Bank Center. Nominated by President Reagan on September 25, 1981, Phoenix resident Sandra Day O'Connor broke the gender barrier on the U.S. Supreme Court when she was sworn in as the first female judge. 1985 saw the Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station, the nation's largest nuclear power plant, begin electrical production. 1987 was marked by visits by both both Pope John Paul II and Mother Teresa, there was an influx of refugees due to low-cost housing in the Sunny Slope area in the 1990s, resulting in 43 different languages being spoken in local schools by the year 2000. The new 20-story City Hall opened in 1992, and 1993 saw the creation of Tent City by Sheriff Joe Arpaio, using inmate labor to alleviate overcrowding in the Maricopa County jail system, the fourth largest in the world. The famous Phoenix Lights UFO sightings took place in March 1997. Phoenix has maintained a growth streak in recent years, growing by 24.2% before 2007. This made it the second fastest-growing metropolitan area in the United States, surpassed only by Las Vegas. In 2008, Squaw Peak, the second tallest mountain in the city, was renamed Piestewa Peak after Army Specialist Lorianne Piestewa, an Arizonan and the first Native American woman to die in combat while serving in the U.S. military, as well as being the first American female casualty of the 2003 Iraq War. 2008 also saw Phoenix as one of the cities hardest hit by the subprime mortgage crisis, and by early 2009 the median home price was $150,000, down from its $262,000 peak in 2007. Crime rates in Phoenix have gone down in recent years, and once troubled, decaying neighborhoods such as South Mountain, Alhambra, and Maryvale have recovered and stabilized. Recently, downtown Phoenix and the Central Core have experienced renewed interest and growth, resulting in numerous restaurants, stores, and businesses opening or relocating to Central Phoenix.